Hi. I'm Vector T13, the creator and developer of the Antidetect project. Antidetect is a unique software product that allows you to change your identity on the Internet. In this video, I will introduce beginners to my software. And for advanced users who are customers of our service and have been working with the Antidetect project for a long time, I recommend paying attention to the timecodes in the description of this video. There you can choose the material you need, but I would recommend starting with the second part of the video, in which I will talk about the new one. Functionality and the latest updates of the project. Well, for those who have not yet worked with the Antidetect product, I want to start a short lecture. So, here we go. What is an Antidetect? Antidetect, as I said before, is a product that allows you to change your personality. Why do you need it? You ask yourself. Do you know what the best-selling product is on the Internet? Ask yourself a question. Maybe it's iPhones? No. Maybe it's drugs? No. What is the best-selling product on the Internet? It would be more correct to say not what, but who. And that's you, the user. You're the best-selling product on the Internet. The slave market has ceased to exist, but it has ceased to exist in the real world. On the Internet, the slave market is the largest chunk of gold. And every corporation is trying to cut off a piece of this huge piece of gold. I'll tell you what's going on and what I mean. In the eyes of the corporation, the user is just a wallet. And you can sell a product to this wallet, you can sell a service, you can sell information. If you can't sell a product, a service, or information, then you can sell the user. And then one corporation resells that user to another corporation. And in the eyes of this user, nothing bad happens. Oh, I switched to Google. Great, I switched to Amazon. Thanks to Google. Because I'm dumb, I can't even remember what domain name Amazon has. I went to eBay. I made a purchase there. I switched to Pornhub. I had a great time there. There are many such examples. And what do you use when you navigate through these resources? You're using browsers that are written by the same corporations. You're using the Windows operating system, which is a botnet in itself, a virus in itself. Every time you install your operating system, it collects data from your PC. It collects data about your location. It collects data about your devices and LAN devices. And then it sends the data to Microsoft servers and conditionally says, "Hey, I'm here. Here it is, a new user, a new user, a new slave." Some users who can listen to this video and have probably already found a solution to this problem. You can uninstall the Windows operating system, install Linux. If you go even further, you can install Tails, you can install Qubes, or Wonix and other special editions of the Linux operating system, and in this case, the spying on the part of Windows will be over. The use of custom browsers allows you to avoid being tracked by Google and everything is fine. Everything is cool and it seems that the issue has been resolved and this is the end of our 5-minute video. However, I want to tell such users right away. You are deeply mistaken. Your installed Tails, your installed Wonix, Qubes and other various editions of Linux will not solve a damn thing at all. Line. And I'll explain why. There is a concept called the balaclava principle. What is the balaclava principle? Let's imagine that the Internet is a big city. In this big city, there are payment systems, there are banks, there are shops, and there are just streets where the user just walks. So, when you install special editions of operating systems on your PC, special software for anonymity, in quotation marks, what happens in this case? In that case, you put on a balaclava, and when you go outside in a balaclava, what happens? No one will know your real face, but everyone will know where the idiot in the balaclava went. In this case, anonymization leads to the uniqueness of this user. In addition, try to go to a bank in balaclava, try to go to a government office in balaclava, try to go to a hardware store in balaclava. They won't let you in, they won't let you in, and at best they'll just throw you out the door, at worst they'll call the police. Why is this happening? The fact is that our world is not made for anonymity. Unfortunately, in the world we are all used to living in, corporations play the biggest role. Why? Because they have the money. The better they know you, the user, the more money they can make. What do I mean by that? Let's imagine a web resource that sells goods. Online store. Users are switching to this online store. For example, it was visited by 10 users. The store does not know what kind of users they are, what kind of advertising, what products to offer them. However, if the store uses user tracking technology, then it can realize that out of 10 users who have switched to it, one user is a 70-year-old grandmother, maybe sell her a hearing aid, and another user, which is a 13-year-old girl, maybe sell her a CD of Justin Bieber songs. By the way, CDs are still on sale, who knows? Let us know in the comments. And if we mix up these products, if we offer a 13-year-old girl a hearing aid, will she buy it? No. If we offer a 70-year-old grandmother a Justin Bieber song, will she buy it? No, she'll curse us. In this case, the store will not make any money. However, the better the store knows its user, the more accurately the product will be offered to him. And the more accurately this user will be monetized. Heck, remember Pornhub. Remember other sites. They know what kind of porn you're watching. They give you recommendations based on your preferences, so they know what you're jerking off to in the evenings. They want to avoid it. Antidetect allows you to change your personality so that you don't wear a balaclava, but every time you are a completely different personality and personality that completely coincides with the parameters of a real person. Let's go. Let's get acquainted. So, if you are interested and want to use the Antidetect software product, I recommend starting your acquaintance with the Detect Expert web resource, and I also immediately want to recommend a Telegram channel under the simple name Antidetect. Antidetect is the main channel of Vector T13 Technologies, of which I am the representative, founder and CEO. The Detect Expert web resource combines the ability to use Antidetect as a software product, as well as to use additional services, such as proxy, SMS activation, i.e. virtual numbers, and a huge number of interesting checkers. But we'll talk about what checkers are a little later. So, the Antidetect software product is a modified version of VirtualBox, or rather, it is not a modified version of VirtualBox, it is a separate product from VirtualBox. It's based on VirtualBox's source code, of course, but it's been redesigned so that we can create an unlimited number of virtual machines inside one of our physical computers. That is, when you want to become a new person, for example, You can go to the store and buy a laptop. You can buy 10 laptops. How much money do you have? 100 laptops to buy, maybe. My software product allows you to create an unlimited number of real computers with real parameters inside one of your physical PCs. How does my product differ, for example, from anti-detect browsers? For those who have been interested in the topic of anti-detects, you can find various browsers on the Internet that allow you to supposedly ensure your privacy. I'll tell you how my product differs from them. First of all, my product is the only product that doesn't affect the browser itself in any way. That is, other developers took the source code of the Chromium browser or the source code of Firefox, reworked it to add functionality, and then screwed the licensing system into it. Voila! The finished product is there. In my case, we do not affect the browser itself in any way. We work at a lower level, at the hardware level. That is, we create unique computers, unique virtual computers. Then, accordingly, the operating system is installed and the browser itself is used. For the browser, we will be a new person every time, and for all the web resources we will work with. Anti-Detect is the only project on the Internet that runs at such a low level and allows you to emulate hardware, allows you to emulate ports, video cards, motherboards, mice, processors, anything you want. Let's move on. This is the number one difference. Difference number two. The Anti-Detect project is currently the only project in this area that does not store user information on its servers. If you use anti-detect browsers, you may not notice, but the information, your session, your profile, let's say, it will be on the developer's servers, it is not on your computer. In other words, any time the developer wants it, they can access your personal data. Some developers, of course, say no, we can't do that, because all user data, it's encrypted. But I'll tell you this, if something like this really existed in reality, and not just in words, firstly, it would be demonstrated, and secondly, of course, they can say, this is a super secret system that cannot be shown. Okay, shall we believe it? Secondly, in order to create such a system, a data encryption system, it will be necessary to spend a fairly large amount of resources, and there is absolutely no profit for the developer. So if you want to believe them, you can believe them, but in any case, even if they are encrypted, even if they are decrypted, they are always on the developer's servers. In our case, in the case of an anti-detect project, a licensing system is also used, but a system called kgen.sh is used. This is a public system and each of you can register in it and get acquainted with its functionality. That is, each person you create is on your desktop computer, it is not on any servers, and there are no connections with the servers of Vector T13 Technologies. In other words, when you run Vector T13's anti-detect project, it doesn't communicate with Vector T13 Technology servers. Vector doesn't know you've launched this product, it doesn't know where you are, it doesn't know anything about you. The kgen.sh system. It was chosen, firstly, due to its functionality and secondly, due to the fact that it is public. And, as I said earlier, any of you can register in this system and get acquainted with its functionality and understand that there are no such, for example, taking user screenshots, keyloggers and other functionality that allows you to monitor users. By the way, this is an interesting question. Perhaps in anti-detect browsers that communicate with their servers. Is there such functionality? I wonder if I should have thought about it. In fact, if you use your own licensing system, your own servers, then nothing prevents the developer from adding keylogger to his software product, for example, or adding, for example, the ability to create screenshots. You must admit that it is quite interesting. And then maybe you accidentally have your crypto assets disappear from your PC and you think you have some kind of virus, probably right? You will use antiviruses, but you will not know that the most important virus was provided to you by the person who was supposed to protect you from it. Keygen.sh does not contain such functionality, and therefore the software from Vector T13 is absolutely secure. It does not connect to the servers of Vector T13 Technologies and uses only a few bytes of information in order to check the license and really make sure that you are the user for whom this software was created. So, we have got acquainted with the advantages of this project. We will get acquainted with the rest of the advantages in the course of our lecture. Now, let's move on to see what versions of the AntiDetect project are currently available. To do this, go to the Software tab on the Detect Expert website and then to AntiDetect Editions. After a little description, you can see that there are two versions available for users at the moment. The first version is Premium Edition, the second version is Personal Edition. I'll answer your question right away. Why don't we have a free version? A few years ago, from 2018 to 2021 to be exact, we did support the free version, but we abandoned it. We refused to do this due to a number of reasons. Firstly, absolutely unnecessary labor costs, because in fact the free version is necessary for nothing, only to attract customers. It's like a trial dose of a drug. In our case, we have a huge number of customers, such that we are not interested in attracting new customers, so the free version is no longer supported. And you can find old free versions of the AntiDetect project on the internet, but alas, they are so outdated that using them is probably nothing, not much different from using a regular virtual box. Therefore, at the moment, only two versions are actively supported for users. The first version is Premium, the second version is Personal. The Premium version is the version for all users. The price of this version is only $90 per month, which is a subscription. It allows you to work on two devices, i.e., you can work with your friend, or for example, if you have two PCs, you can work on those two PCs. This version, it's more for home use. That is, for, relatively speaking, one or two people, just that. For those who, for example, are engaged in journalistic activities, for those who want, for example, to hide their finances from ill-wishers or from their wife, although in some cases the wife is also an ill-wisher. For those who are engaged in small advertising campaigns and are active, for example, on the web resources of Amazon or eBay. PayPal of that kind. The personal version is a product for professionals. The cost of the personal version starts at $1,800, but if the Patreon version has a monthly subscription, then the personal version does not have such a subscription. This is a product that is created individually for each user for his goals and objectives. The personal version, as I mentioned, starts at $1,800, and if we click on the Buy button now, we can familiarize ourselves with the types of software that are available for the user to buy. The very first type has a price of $1,800, type number 8. The top type has a price of $9,500. This is not a subscription, it is a one-time payment, and accordingly, you can use this product for an unlimited amount of time. Many users have been with us since 2018, for example, and 2018, the month of January, is the moment when the AntiDetect project was founded. We are one of the oldest projects in this field on the Internet. So, many users who bought the product back in 2018, they are still using it, and we give them an update. And what an update is, I'll tell you a little later. So, you choose the version that you need. In this case, for example, I'm going to choose the Amazon version, click Next, and you have the option to choose the operating system, choose the personal presets, what it is. Each web resource has a specific set of settings. In other words, I'll give you an example. Google, it loves new users. Okay, come in new user, we'll create a personality for you. Amazon doesn't really like new users because it can't figure out how a user could appear out of nowhere. For example, Stripe hates new users because a new user is a mystery to them. They don't know what kind of person they are, whether that identity is trustworthy or whether that identity is a scammer. Therefore, each anti-fraud system, each web resource, it has its own characteristics. And if the web resource you need is not in this list, in the list of software types, then I recommend you, firstly, to contact the support service. You can contact the support service via the chat on the Detect Expert website, or using the Telegram Messenger, and clarify whether there is a separate preset, that is, whether there is a separate set of settings for the necessary. A web resource. If you don't have such a set of settings, and you are working with some unique resource that another user does not work with, then in this case I recommend you to use the personal preset option, which allows you to do the following. A separate developer will analyze the web resource you need, find which anti-fraud system is used in this web resource, and create a unique preset, that is, a unique set of settings that will allow you to bypass the security system of this web resource. Active devices. That is, how many active machines you want to use. I'm talking about physical host PCs, there are no restrictions on virtual machines. In this case, we provide 2 devices by default, that is, you can, again, share the personal version with a friend, or work on several devices at once. White label. If you want to use your corporate identity, the style of your company, or a group of users, or if you want, for example, to use this product as a resell. And the last option available is the Personal Extension Pack. The Personal Extension Pack is an option that allows us to add custom microphones and webcams. We'll talk about that a little later, and I'll show you what it is. Actually, after clicking the Buy Now button, you can enter, for example, Telegram. Click the Buy Now button. Read the offer agreement, where the entire position of the company in relation to customers is fully stated. Click Buy and then go to the purchase page accordingly. In this case, we have only $120 on the balance of this user, which is not enough for a purchase, but you can replenish your account with a custom amount. You can make payments in cryptocurrencies. You can also pay directly by bank transfer using IBAN or SEPA or using the Ideal system to the details of Vector T13 Technologies in the Netherlands, as it is convenient for you. So, in this case, we have already discussed the moment of purchase. I told you how you can do it. Let's move on to the installation of this software. Now my personal profile is used on the Detect Expert website, and we already have the software. We have the installation file and it is already installed in the form of software. So, let's get to know our software. After purchasing the Antidetect software, you get a file like this. In this file, If we click on the Properties, Digital Signatures button, you can see that it is signed with certificates from Vector T13 Technologies, and this certificate is valid, as reported to us by the Windows operating system, as well as there is a time of creation of this software. As we can see, this software was created on November 9 at 12:29 a.m. The signature of Vector T13 Technologies is one of the guarantees that you are using the official software. The fact is that on the Internet and, in particular, in Telegram groups, we have quite large chats. We have a Russian language chat for 8,000 people, a separate chat for customers for 1,500 people, well, large resources. So, big resources and big money, they always attract users who want to make money on these resources. In chat rooms, you can sometimes come across enterprising users who are allegedly trying to sell cracked software from Vector T13. So, I want to tell you right away how this hack is made. I'll tell you how. There is a software called Resource Hacker. Resource Hacker allows you to change, for example, in this case, change the user's nickname to any custom one. That is, you can make, for example, personal not for Vector T13, but for Santa Claus, for example. However, any change will entail the fact that it will not be possible to install it on your PC, because the integrity of the program will be violated and, accordingly, the certificate will be broken. So again, enterprising businessmen may say that you need to put the computer in test mode, and so on. Gist. There are a large number of options, I will tell you the essence. At the moment, there is not a single working version of the cracked software from Vector T13. This is a feature of the architecture of the project itself, so the only option is how you can get this software. This is the use of the Detect Expert web resource, the official resource of Vector T13 Technologies, and after receiving the software, you can make sure that you have legitimate software by verifying the digital signature. The drivers that are used in the Antidetect project have two signatures, which I would like to draw your attention to. Is used as a signature of Vector T13 Technologies, as well as a signature of Microsoft. Without Microsoft's signature, drivers can't work. So, our software has been successfully ordered, paid for, received, and then we launch our product. And immediately we see that our software is not registered. We will register it now. So, click OK. The software works even without registration. That is, you can create, for example, a new virtual machine. You can use it, for example, now let's choose a name for a virtual machine, select a disk image. However, when we go to the Presets tab, that is, the most interesting point in the software, they are not available. Just like on the Network tab, you won't be able to do anything. That is, the functionality of the software at the moment is at the level of a virtual box, namely a standard virtual box. That is, if you want to run a simple virtual machine as a virtual box, you do not need to register the software. However, how to register this software? Go to the File button, Preferences, and here we have the license item. In the license section, we see our machine ID. Machine ID is a number that is generated based on your motherboard and hard drive data. Therefore, if you suddenly want to change the hard drive or motherboard, the machine ID will change and the software will have to be re-registered. We copy our key, and then go to the Detect Expert web resource. In the Detect Expert menu, we can see the Antidetect Trip personal license item. Go here, we see our login, We see our status, the status of our license. We see the type of software that is used, in this case, type 5 is used. And we see the end date of our key. As I said earlier, we don't have any restrictions on how long a user can stay. That is, those who bought the software in 2018, they still use it. However, I hasten to tell you some very bad news. The thing is, unfortunately, people sometimes die. Yes, it happens. A person can die and so can we. Vector T13 Technologies does not store codebases of personal versions if the person has not requested an update for more than 1 year. So if you're dead, we won't give you an update. Alas. Regarding updates. Our software is updated on average once a month, and updates are a key point in countering the anti-corruption system. Fraud prevention system, but in fact, these systems are fraudsters themselves. In this case, you can get the update in 2 different ways. The first way is absolutely free, that is, every time an update is released, you can see the corresponding inscription in your personal account on the Detect Expert website. In addition, we immediately publish information in Telegram groups, that is, as soon as the update is released, we have a big announcement and you can contact the support service to receive this update. You will get it absolutely free of charge. There are no additional hidden fees, but I would like to draw your attention to the fact that at the moment we have a total of a little more than 1,000 active clients of the personal version. Accordingly, if after the announcement of the update you contacted the support service within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, for example, then okay. You will receive your update quite quickly. But if you contacted the support service in a week, in 2 weeks, in a month, maybe even about receiving the update, then in this case you will not be able to receive. Its renewal in a not very short time. This is explained by the large queue. But there is a paid upgrade option, that is, you can get your update on a paid basis in a short time, since a separate developer will be allocated who will give you this update. So, let's move on to the registration of our car. We already have one car registered. I'm going to register our current car now. Click on the Change button and enter your machine ID. Click Change Machine ID number 2. We'll see that our machine ID has been updated on the web. After that, we copy this key, click on it with the left mouse button, paste our key into the appropriate field in the AntiDetect project, and the system tells us to restart the program in order for the changes to take effect. Close the AntiDetect and restart it. As we can see, the license has the status of valid, and we see for whom it was issued and when this license expires. You don't have to worry about the 28th year. The fact is that there is no point in putting a date, there, 3000 or 4000, for example, because there is absolutely no point in it. The project is often updated, and in 2018 the project was radically different from what we have now. In addition to minor updates, that is, small updates that are related, for example, to updating the browser and so on, we also have large updates. Major updates are updates to the entire system, that is, the entire platform. Major updates. They move on to changing the design of the software, radically changing the functionality. That is, for example, the latest update, it made it possible to fully automate the process of creating virtual machines, for example. Plus, it is always associated with the complete processing of hardware. That is, in other words, all combinations of hardware that are inside, they will be rewritten. Plus there is always support for new combinations. That is, new, more modern hardware of a personal computer. So stay tuned and subscribe to the Telegram channel. So, our software has been successfully ordered, bought, received and registered. We are ready to get to work. So, let's start working with the Antidetector project. First of all, we need to create our new virtual machine. To do this, click on the New button. After that, enter the name of the virtual machine. In fact, the name doesn't affect anything. That is, we can enter any custom name. But I don't recommend using any language other than English. I'll explain why, because in some cases it can lead to the loss of the VM address. So it's better to use English. You can also select the folder where you want your virtual machine to be saved. After that, we need to select the operating system image. In this case, we don't have the image selected now. How do we get the operating system image? Go to the Microsoft website, or rather go to Google, download Windows 10. Antidetect supports Windows 10 and Windows 11 operating systems. Running on Windows 10 is more stable, so I'm going to show you an example on the Windows 10 version now. So we now have the Windows 10 operating system download page in front of us. We have the option to download a separate utility and use it to download the image and save it to your PC. However, it can be made simpler. To do this, press the F12 key on the keyboard, which opens the developer mode, after which we click on the corresponding button at the top of our screen, which will change the appearance of our web page, after which we refresh our web page. The script worked in such a way that we can download directly the version of the operating system we need. Accordingly, select this edition, click Download, and then select the language. Quite an important point, depending on the region in which you work, I recommend choosing the appropriate language edition. In this case, we will choose the English United States edition. Click Confirm and, accordingly, load the 64-bit version. 32-bit older versions are not supported by the Antidetect project. Click on the Download button, and the operating system image will be downloaded, which we can use in the Antidetect project. I already have this image downloaded, so I'm choosing the latest 64-bit version of Windows 10 right now. Next, we select Edition. I recommend using the Pro N version for casual users. Index N in this case indicates that additional multimedia capabilities have been removed from the system. We don't need them. Choose Windows Pro N. Further, unattended install. An important point is that unattended is the automatic installation of the operating system. In other words, the system will be, you don't need to do anything, everything will be installed in a fully automatic mode. In fact, there are no interesting points for you on this tab. If you want to set a password, for example, OK, you can set it. You can also enter the product key if you want. In fact, you can skip this tab. Go to the Hardware tab. In this case, the VM resource allocation system is used. If you're using a modern PC, then I recommend using at least 8 GB of RAM for a virtual machine. In this case, I'll increase it to 16 for this video. Number of CPU cores. Less than 2 cannot be used. Let me tell you why. The fact is that web resources can see the number of cores of your PC and, accordingly, if you allocate one CPU core, firstly, your system will work very slowly, and secondly, it will be anomalous for web resources that you use one CPU core. Therefore, I recommend at least allocating 2 cores, and preferably 4 cores. More than 4 cores, if you dedicate, in some cases the system may fall into throttling. In other words, the system will be swamped by the resources allocated to it. Therefore, 4 cores is the best option. Further, hard drive. In this case, a 1 TB virtual disk is created. This disk will not take up 1 TB of your actual physical disk. Let me explain why. The fact is that a virtual disk with a capacity of 1 TB is the maximum space that a virtual machine can occupy. Why do we choose 1 TB and not, for example, 128 GB or 50 GB, for example? The fact is that web resources can know how much free memory you have on your PC. And when we get to the tests, I can show you. Therefore, 1 TB is the best option. In reality, you will have about 35 GB of disk space on your disk. Accordingly, the more software you load into it, the longer the system lives, the more space it will take up. On average, systems that live for half a year take up about 40 to 45 GB of hard drive space, so take care of this in advance. I also want to note that a hard disk is probably 60 to 70% of the speed of a virtual machine. So if you remember about such a thing as hard disk drives, forget about this concept. Use NVMe and you will be happy. The system will fly. Next, the Presets tab is the most important thing there is. Activate it and select the necessary preset for the system you want to work with. You can get acquainted with the presets both on the Detect Expert web resource itself and inside the software. There are presets for payment systems, banks, and so on. Some of the presets are hidden. I warn you about this in advance. Let me explain why. Because the publication of such presets will lead to unnecessary attention to our product. In other words, any mention will be indexed in search engines. And, accordingly, this product may begin to be looked at in more detail. And in this case, the situation will be the same as with bypassing the detection of virtual machines. A virtual machine has basic functionality for bypassing virtual machine detections. In other words, it is impossible to know by simple means that it is a virtual machine, but the architecture of virtual machines itself has a peculiarity. You can never hide that you're using a virtual machine. Never. Remember this, you can't hide a virtual machine. There are products, such as VM Protect, that use a specific set of methods to determine that a virtual machine is being used. Can we bypass this service and similar services? My answer is yes, we can do it, but we can only do it in personal versions. I'll explain why. The thing is, if I release software, such as a $90 per month version of Patreon, and I specify that this version bypasses VM Protect, there will be, for example, 500 users who will buy the software. Everything seems to be fine, but the information that we are bypassing VM Protect will be in the VM Protect company a few minutes after we release this product, since all the resources are watching us, the activities of our company, so VM Protect will immediately buy this version itself, analyze it. For spare parts and make an antidote for it. In this case, these 500 users who came and bought the software, they will work with it, well, maybe a few hours, maybe a few days, after which the software will stop working and these users will come to us with a claim why your software does not work. We're going to update again, VM Protect is going to update us again, we're going to make an antidote. In other words, users will work for a few hours or a few days, but then they will stop working again. And in this case, we will be constantly wasting resources and time in an absolutely useless struggle. Therefore, if you want to bypass the protection systems against the detections of virtual machines, in this case you can write to the support service separately and we will create a personal version for you, so that you have the opportunity to bypass and use the software you need. Here, I'm going to use the simplest preset, the Google preset, as a test. Go to the Network tab. In the Network tab, we have several controllers. I guess I'm getting ahead of myself and I'm going to tell you what presets are. Let's focus on the presets. As I mentioned earlier, presets are specific sets of settings. These settings are not obvious. In other words, what is a preset? A preset is when the user chooses a preset, he chooses a set of settings that are most optimal for the anti-fraud system he needs, because, as I said, all systems are different and some systems have their own peculiarities. For example, I'll give you an example. For example, there is a system called Castle. The Castle system, for example, uses a very interesting moment. The moment of detection and detection of the user, thanks to the detection of DPI, PPI, aspect ratio of your monitor, and so on. Gist. When you select a preset that uses the Castle system, the anti-detect will forbid you, for example, from changing the screen resolution in your virtual machine. It will determine the optimal DPI parameter, PPI, set it and, accordingly, forbid you, for example, to do anything with the screen resolution. Another example is the Threat Metrics system. Threat Metrics is now used on most web resources. And, for example, when using Threat Metrics, the streaming mode will be enabled, the so-called. You can find what the streaming mode is in my webinars, how it is possible to identify the user with the help of Google's streaming mode. This is necessary for Threat Metrics, but absolutely not necessary for anyone else, for any other anti-fraud system. So presets are sets of non-obvious settings, they are a simplification of the user's life. Choose the system you need, everything is fine. Next, the anti-detect will configure your operating system in the way that will be necessary and optimal for the anti-fraud system you have chosen. So, let's go to the Network tab. On the Network tab, we have the MAC address controller. 1. Select the MAC address of your network card inside the virtual machine. Looking ahead, I will say that web resources cannot access your MAC address. In the past, they really could do it, but now they can't. GDPR regulations prohibit obtaining a MAC address. NAT vendor is the next type. What's it? In many guides about anonymity, you can find a program for changing your MAC address. However, since these guides are written by imbeciles do not understand that your MAC address is not just some kind of identifier. It is an identifier that allows you to communicate with your router or directly with your ISP at the link level. In other words, if you change the MAC address, you need to change it not only on the client device, but also on the device to which the client is connected. Therefore, in this case, it is a virtual router. And this virtual router also has its own MAC address. They change and are created automatically, so you can skip this setting, I'm just talking about it. Next, a proxy. What proxy connection options do we have? The first option is not to use a proxy. Not using a proxy is a pretty good option. Let me explain why, because we can use the TCP/IP fingerprinting system in this case. I'll tell you what it is a little later. For now, just remember that there is a no proxy mode. When you activate the no proxy mode during the installation of the operating system, in the process of configuring it, the system will stop and ask you whether you have set a proxy or not. Why is this done? The fact is that some users use custom proxy software, and in this case we do not prohibit it. That is, the system will stop its work, and you will have the opportunity to set the proxy you need. Further, SOCKS 5. A standard SOCKS 5 connection in a proxy, nothing unusual. Enter the IP address, port, username and password if necessary, and you can also enter a custom DNS server. A system called TUN to SOCKS is used here. In other words, a separate TUN device is created, similar to OpenVPN, which routes all traffic through itself, that is, a separate network card, which prevents leaks of your real IP address. 3. OpenVPN. You can either enter the URL where your file will be downloaded, or you can download the file and specify where the file is located on your hard drive. After that, specify the username and password if necessary. As for proxies, let's go to the Detect Expert website now. We have a certain selection of proxies here. I will tell you what their difference is, how they differ from each other. The first type of proxy is the LTE proxy. LTE, i.e. the source of proxy data is modems. You can select the country that suits you, read the description of these proxies, and select the appropriate amount of time for how long you want to rent these proxies. That is, for example, for our test, I'm going to take some kind of proxy. Well, since we chose USA, okay. Let's take for example, no, we have HTTP. Let's take USA T-Mobile for 1 week. Click the Buy button. Please note that there is an auto-update function. In other words, after 7 days, when the term expires, your proxy will be automatically renewed. That's why it's important. If you don't want to, we remove this checkbox. And I don't want to, so I press the Buy button. After that, we go to the My Proxies tab, and here we back up the server, as we see now. After just a while, we can see that we have our own proxy. We see its IP address, we see how much traffic is left on this proxy, we see the data, the geodata of our proxy, we see the login, password, we see the connection of the SOCKS 5 type. We can enter the necessary comment here, for example, we click Save. Here is our comment, and accordingly we can see the expiration date of our proxy and the possibility of auto-renewal. So, if we click on the Download VPN Config button, please note that we can click the Copy Link address here, and for example, enter it here. Yes, this is the address we have. So, for the anti-detect to work, you can simply copy this address, copy link address, and enter it here. After that, username, password, respectively, copy our username and copy our password. So, password, yes, everything was Skyped. Okay, I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that on an LTE proxy you have the ability to change your IP address once a minute. That is, pay attention to what IP address we are currently using, click on the button, the IP address changes and after a while we will have a new IP address. Here we can see, now we have our new IP address. There are no restrictions on changing your IP address, that is, the only time limit is that you can change this IP address once every 60 seconds. Accordingly, for those who work in large volumes, for example, proxy is rented from us for 7 days for $40. You can calculate that if you need to create, for example, 50 accounts per day. Let's use a calculator and calculate how profitable it is. So, for example, we create 50 accounts per day, we multiply 50 accounts by 7, respectively, 350 accounts are created, for example, during our working week. Now we divide the cost of $40 by 350 and get the value of our IP address equal to 11 cents. This is the lowest price on the market. So the cheapest proxies on the DetectExpert website. Plus, using an OpenVPN connection in this case allows us to get support for the UDP protocol. In other words, you'll always have your native DNS and fully working WebRTC, both stun and turn. Therefore, Proxy by DetectExpert is the best solution on the market at the moment. And accordingly, for those who work, for example, in a company, this is an ideal option, because, relatively speaking, where one person works in the morning, another person works in the evening, uses the same proxy connection and the number of accounts is created accordingly more and the price drops even more. There are also residential static proxies. You choose the country of the ISP accordingly. In this case, one IP address for 1 month costs $5.99. This is a dedicated IP address with high speed. This is a real ISP, that is, these are not data center proxies, but an absolutely good residential proxy, as if you are in the US. The only disadvantage is that this is one. There is only one IP address and this proxy does not support the UDP protocol. So you will need to manually set the DNS. Well, this is conditionally manual. The software will do everything for you, as well as enable the substitution of TC selection. Go. So, we've chosen our proxy. Okay, now let's choose a time zone. And which time zone do we need to choose? We have New York. Select the New York time zone. Just write New York in here, accordingly. Select the time zone we need, and then move on to the GPS coordinates. This is quite an important point, and I want to introduce it to you. In the Windows operating system, there is the Edge browser, there is the Chrome browser, there is Firefox, 3 of the most popular browsers. So, when you set GPS coordinates here, a separate device will be created in your virtual machine, a separate GPS module that will tell your browsers that certain coordinates are being used. But, please note, in the Edge browser, access to the GPS module is enabled by default, and in the Chrome browser, it is disabled by default. We will get acquainted with this in practice. I will now show you how to set the coordinates. Select New York. And disable our developer mode. We don't need it. Choose accordingly some place in New York. Well, let it be Brooklyn. By the way, before choosing a place, I recommend turning on map viewing, viewing the area in order to choose not an industrial enterprise, but a real house. For example, we are going to live in this house now. Exit the viewing mode where we have just been, well, approximately, excuse me, remove the view mode and select the appropriate point. Here she is. We have coordinates displayed in the address bar. Here they are. Go to the Antidetect project and enter these coordinates 40.676977. We have truncated, since even this accuracy is already quite enough. That is, 2 digits before and 4 after, and select the longitude 950. There is then the GPS module we have active, after which there are additional tweaks. The first tweak is to block the IPv6 protocol if you have. If you don't have support in your proxy, e.g. IPv6, then I recommend activating this option. Blocking the Windows Update. Why do I need this option? The fact is that proxy, for example, in this case we have 15 gigabytes of traffic. You must admit that it would be rather stupid if, for example, 6 gigabytes of this traffic were destroyed in order to update our virtual machine. Therefore, check the box Windows Update block, and after that the Windows operating system will not slow down and will not use your traffic for nothing. Farther, Auto Start Fake WebRTC with Windows. An important option. I recommend using this option only in SOCKS 5 proxy or no proxy mode. With OpenVPN, you don't need to use it. What is Auto Start Fake WebRTC? Fake WebRTC is a WebRTC spoofing system that will allow web resources to report that your WebRTC IP address matches your proxy IP address. Well, you can find out what it is in my guides. Next, the closed option to block the QUIC protocol. What is QUIC? The QUIC protocol is a protocol that was founded by Google in 2012. Now there is an active implementation of the HTTP3 Hypertransport Protocol and, accordingly, the use of the QUIC protocol leads to something. Let me give you an example. There is a resource called, for example, Hoover. So, this resource uses the QUIC protocol in order to get your real IP address. And you can do a test. You can enable proxy or Antidetect SOCKS 5 proxy without blocking the QUIC protocol, and in this case it will show you your real IP. Why does this happen? The reason for this is that the IP address will be queried using a separate protocol called QUIC. And if you don't have the QUIC proxy protocol, if your proxy doesn't support the QUIC protocol, then I recommend just blocking it. In our case, it's active because we have an OpenVPN connection selected. When you select SOCKS 5, let's do an example. Here's SOCKS 5, we have a block QUIC checkbox, please. Let's go back to the OpenVPN tab. NetBIOS block. NetBIOS is a rather outdated feature of the Windows operating system, which made it possible to detect a computer in local networks. In our case, you shouldn't use this option, that is, we leave it as it is, the NetBIOS block tab, the checkbox. And the last tab, the last checkbox is Offline OS install. What's it? I recommend using this option only in one case, if you will be working against Microsoft Web Resources. The fact is that, as I have already said, if we consider the process of installing an operating system, then when creating a user identity, or more precisely, even before creating a user identity, there is already a connection to Microsoft servers and a handshake procedure takes place. That is, the operating system is assigned certain identifiers. These identifiers are assigned to the corresponding profile in the Your IP address, i.e. your real IP address, will also appear there, since it is not possible to enable the proxy system until the initialization stage, until the stage of creating the user's identity. then your real IP address will be known to Microsoft. Therefore, if you are working with Microsoft, check the offline OS install box, after which your operating system will be installed without the Internet. And in this case, you will have the opportunity to configure the proxy yourself inside the virtual machine and then turn on the Internet. In this case, the handshake procedure will only be performed through the proxified connection. The best option for working with Microsoft. And the last tab, the Anti-OS tab. Anti-OS used to be a separate software, but at the moment there is no point in using it and a large number of features from this software are now in front of your eyes. What's it? Let's take a look at each of the points step by step. First point. Randomize font. What's it? Let's go to a web resource called BrowserLeaks, the Fingerprinting Foundation, and here we pay attention to the fact that there is a fingerprinting system that determines the number of fonts we have installed on our PC. So, an interesting possibility of user identification is associated with the font fingerprinting system. When we install an operating system, for example, an English language one, we have, for example, 56 fonts. When we install a system, for example, system with the Chinese language, then we will not have 56 fonts, we will have 76 fonts, for example, and there will be, accordingly, unique fonts, that is, web resources have the opportunity to request not only the number of fonts, but also what specific fonts are available. Therefore, thanks to this technology, it is possible, firstly, to determine which edition of your operating system is. Plus it is possible to determine its version, since in Windows fonts, for example, 10 and Windows 7, they may differ in their number. There's also the ability to determine what software is being used on your computer, because if you install Microsoft Office, for example, or Adobe Photoshop, they install their standard set of fonts. But in our case, the most important difference of randomize font is protection against detection of a new operating system. After all, if we do not randomize fonts, then in this case we will always have the number of fonts equal to the number of fonts in a clean newly installed operating system when creating a virtual machine. When this checkbox is activated, the system will automatically install a certain set of fonts each time. Is the next checkbox the randomize audio checkbox? Previously, there was a system, but it still exists by definition for user identification based on an audio fingerprint. I will not pay much attention to it in this guide. You can read separately on my YouTube channel. I want to say that on the At the moment, the system is not actively used only for detecting antidetects, in other words, simply honeypot. Next, checkbox number 3. Change Windows install date. If we install our operating system now, it will accordingly accept the installation date that we have now. And this installation date will be visible even in the system files of Chrome browser. Therefore, this option is active by default. It will age your system as if it was installed 6 months ago, a year ago. Farther, disable Windows Traffic Control. The Windows operating system has a traffic control system that sometimes tends to slow down the Internet, and to prevent this from happening, the corresponding checkbox is in front of you. Further, checkbox Disable Windows Defender. Windows Defender, i.e. the built-in protection system, also tends to slow down our proxies and slow down the overall performance of the system. In the case of virtual machines, it doesn't make sense to use Windows Defender, so we have it disabled by default. Further, randomized TCP fingerprint. This is an incredibly important point that I want to draw your attention to. The fact is that web resources can identify the user by analyzing the TCP headers of the user's packets. That is, imagine that we have our operating system. In this operating system, when we communicate with a web resource, a connection is used, the TCP protocol is used. Due to its architecture, TCP has a large number of headers that store information, for example, about traffic segmentation, traffic volume, maximum packet size, etc. I'm going to show you what it looks like in practice. Open a new tab. For example, here's what our traffic looks like, and this is just a partial display of our TCP fingerprint. So, these parameters, since they will not change on your computer, in fact, if you use even different proxies, the system can identify you by analyzing your TCP headers. In order to prevent this, a system of randomization of TCP headers is used. But here is a very important warning written in parentheses: it works only with the network bridge mode. I'll show you what network bridge mode is after you create a virtual machine. Next, the Install Chrome tab. Respectively, there will be a request to install the Chrome browser. I will say right away that the request is formed syntactically correctly. For those who don't know, when you request to download the Google Chrome browser, a unique ID is created, and this unique ID is then assigned to the installer. What's it? A separate video on the YouTube channel, We Watch and Study. In other words, every Chrome instance that is loaded is unique. Therefore, it is not good to use the same web installer for several virtual machines. In my software, a correct synthetic request was made to Google's servers to load the Google Chrome browser. The next tab is Install Random Chrome Extensions. It is disabled by default. What is this tab? It allows you to automatically download various kinds of extensions to the installed Chrome browser. Why do you need it? The fact is that it is possible to determine which extensions the user is using. Let me give you an example. Right now we are on a certain web resource that can determine which extensions are installed in our browser. He saw that we had only one extension installed, and this is indeed a fact. Web properties can't see all the extensions you have installed. However, if a web resource requests a specific extension based on its identification number, it can see it. Accordingly, web resources thus determine, for example, the use of adblock and so on, and in order to avoid this, a system for installing random extensions is used. But it is disabled by default. Let me explain why. The architecture of the Chrome browser allows you to determine that these extensions were installed automatically. The fact is that if the request is made not through the Google Chrome Store, but in some other way, then the corresponding checkbox will be displayed in the browser. What's that checkbox? Here in the browser, when you click on the burger icon, you will have the inscription Chrome is managed by your organization. In other words, this will indicate that you are using an automatic Chrome instance, and I do not recommend using this functionality. Further, but in some cases, by the way, it can help. Further, open port emulation. Activate this tab. What's it? Resource selection can scan open ports on your PC. This is what eBay does, so when the open port emulation option is active, certain ports will be open on your operating system, always different, which are associated with simple resources such as Skype, Steam, Epic Games, Minecraft, etc. The next tab is Fake CPU Cores and RAM, a very complex tab. I don't recommend using it in a simple job. This tab is configured to work with specific anti-fraud systems. This is quite a complex functionality. What is the essence of this functionality? Web resources, as we already know, they can determine the usage on us, the number of cores that we use. And a striking example of this is the resource Fingerprint.com. Fingerprint.com is one of the really cool anti-fraud systems, meaning we see Dropbox, Turkish Airlines, Trustpilot, Kiwi, Klarna, and so on. These are only those resources that have allowed themselves to be published. So, there is an unspoken rule in the resource Fingerprint.com. By the way, you can read about it here in the Resources tab, if I'm not mistaken, on the blog. Yes, here I advise you to read this gist. Fingerprint.com uses a certain rule that goes like this. If a computer has more than 8 cores, then this PC is not a virtual machine, but allocate 8 cores. It doesn't always work because you may have a weak host processor, or because the system may go into throttling. As I said, that is, it will choke on unnecessary resources. In order to bypass the system Fingerprint.com and still show the number of cores that we want, the fake CPU cores function is used. Fake CPU cores is a hook that hacks a certain part of the Windows operating system and allows you to show the number of cores that is specified in the CPU profile. I'm going to show you what a CPU profile is now after we've built our system. And the new functionality of fake WebGL. Some users think that if web resources can see their real graphics card, then it will be good for them. The fake WebGL functionality allows you to replace the video card in WebGL with one of the list in the anti-detect system. Therefore, if you want web resources to see your video card, insert and activate the fake WebGL option. What is SyncDNS? SyncDNS is a separate project that existed in our infrastructure. SyncDNS was a server that allowed TCP traffic to be converted to UDP. In other words, it is a separate resource, I repeat, a separate server. And if your proxy does not support the UDP protocol, then you install SyncDNS. Just insert its IP address, and after that, all your traffic will go from the anti-detect system to a separate server, where it will also be converted into EDP traffic. This functionality was taken from one of the projects on GitHub. The project is called Snort. If you are interested, you can familiarize yourself with it. In our case, No, I'm sorry, not Snort. Not this one. I'm sorry, I forgot. I'll tell you the gist. SyncDNS is not active at the moment, meaning you can't order SyncDNS right now. Let me explain why. Because the project is too complex and not always cost-effective. It costs $40 to maintain a single synth DNS server, as it requires quite a lot of CPU power, and $40 per month for a single proxy is not something every user is willing to pay. Therefore, this project is temporarily disabled. If it returns, you will be able to use it in the corresponding field. So, we've chosen everything we need. By default, I'll say this, Anti-OS has a certain set of parameters, the most optimal one that is needed. You can additionally enable, for example, port emulation and fake WebGL. It's up to you. This will have little impact on the work. Farther, we have now created a platform for our virtual machine. If we press the Start button, it will be installed. But I want to introduce you to additional functionality. Go to the operating system settings. This is where we see our hardware. That is, we see our processor, for example, which is installed here. It is installed automatically, you don't need to set anything manually. We see the socket and so on. The parameters of our motherboard, that is, there are quite a lot of them here, are inside. Every time you create a platform, this data is randomized every time. And you may be confused by the fact that the number of manufacturers, for example, the number of models, is not so large, but I will tell you in practice. The most interesting points, they are in the serial numbers. Serial numbers are the most important parameter when identifying hardware, because we understand that one socket, i.e. a specific platform, cannot have 100 motherboard manufacturers and each manufacturer has 10,000 models. No, that's silly. In fact, there is a socket, for example, we have a socket at the moment 2066 for Intel, and this socket of motherboard manufacturers has only 4 to 5, and each of the manufacturers has only 2, from 1 to 10 models. This is the maximum. And that's why the variety is not very big, and that's fine. This is absolutely normal, because in the world in which we live, what we have created for us, we use and, accordingly, the same users as us, as our virtual user, are all over the world, and there are hundreds of thousands of them. The most interesting thing is the serial number. It is the serial number that distinguishes one mother. For example, from another board, you may be confused by the fact that when you click on the serial number, there are only 6 serial numbers, or, for example, the system, and however, do not be embarrassed. I will explain why this is a trick of the developer. In other words, if I were to give you a canvas of 1,000,000 of these serial numbers here, you might have a freeze. Would be a system. Gist. Serial numbers in the Antidetect project are generated using the same algorithms that are generated by the manufacturer itself, and since the generator is located here, this means that the number of such serial numbers is very large. It doesn't make any sense to display all these serial numbers in the user interface, so if you build a new system, for example, you'll have a completely different set of serial numbers, so don't worry, it's all absolutely normal. Let's move on. In the Drives tab, we just have our optical disks and the physical disk here. The serial numbers are here and the revision is assigned automatically, so you can manually set them if you want. I don't see the point in doing that. The video card is set automatically and will be visible in your browser. Next, the RAM tab. The RAM tab allows you to set additional memory slots. Well, not just memory slots, not additional slots, just memory slots. Why is it not active by default and is activated manually? The fact is that web resources do not receive information about your memory. Therefore, displaying this information additionally means putting additional load on the operating system. In practice, there is no point in this. If you use local software, then be sure to set the RAM slots, the ones that we need. They are automatically selected for the dropped socket. If you're only using a browser, you don't need to do this. Ports tab. Ports have a certain set by default, and it makes no sense to change this set. The fact is that a port is actually the same device as your graphics card, relatively speaking. And the presence of ports in the system distinguishes it from the virtual one, from the real one. Most virtualization tests are based on port detection. In our case, it is used depending on the motherboard. It doesn't make any sense to change the corresponding set of ports. And the last tab is MISC hardware. This is where the keyboard and mouse are restored, as these devices can be requested using your browser's HID Human Interface Device API. And there are a few more points such as ACPI, IHCI, OHCI. Install them. If we set them up now, you only need to install them for local software. We put up just any model. Everything else you don't need to do it. If we work with local software, there is a small number of these controllers here and it is quite enough because they are simple, but a limited number exists. These are controllers. Bus controllers, that's why we don't use it. In general, we leave everything as it is. Let's put it this way. The Network tab here in the settings, it allows, again, to set the MAC address. Well, fingerprints is a rudiment that will be removed soon. There was an option to control the audio, but it doesn't make sense at the moment, since the audio fingerprint is dead. So, the Network tab. This is where the switch that activates IPv6 mode and TCP fingerprint spoofing mode is located. Gist. We have several network adapters, types of network adapters. Now we have the NAT network adapter type set. NAT will use a specific set of constants to handle TCP traffic, meaning it will always be the same. In addition, NAT mode does not support the IPv6 protocol. In other words, if your proxy, for example, if your OpenVPN supports the IPv6 protocol, then it will not work in NAT mode. In order to work with the IPv6 protocol, you need to set the bridged adapter, i.e. the network bridge mode. And then set the addressing accordingly. For example, in my case it is addressing to a wireless USB adapter, to an adapter, to a Wi-Fi adapter. I would also like to draw your attention to the TCP/IP spoofing mode. How to use it? TCP/IP spoofing mode, not fingerprinting, does not work on a regular standard OpenVPN connection. The fact is that when the OpenVPN project is installed, we have a certain network adapter installed, a network adapter of the TUN type. This network adapter of type TUN already has a certain set of constants to handle traffic within itself. In order to change these constants, you need to recompile the OpenVPN project and then sign it with Microsoft, since this is a drive. And no one does that, so if you use OpenVPN or TUN to SOCKS, which creates the same adapter, you won't have a TCP fingerprint spoofed. Moreover, I want to tell you that in standard OpenVPN builds, because of these traffic constants, it is possible for web resources to determine with a 100% probability that you are using OpenVPN, because these constants, these headers, they are specific only to OpenVPN. You can determine that OpenVPN is being used. You can separately determine that WireGuard is being used, for example. There are custom builds of the OpenVPN project, but they deserve a separate lecture. This is a type of proxy that is not actually present on the market. I'm not going to name it, I'll put it this way, so these proxies are used, well, you can actually say by intelligence agencies. To put it simply, they are used by the special services. They are not available on the market, few people know about them, and we will not talk about them in this video. It changes there is a completely different system of work and a real network connection is fully emulated there. That's not what we're talking about right now. So, if you want to replace the TCP/IP fingerprint, then you need to enable the no proxy mode when creating a virtual machine. Then go here and turn on the network adapter. After that, you will activate the TCP/IP fingerprint spoofing system. You may wonder how we can proxy the system if we don't have that option. I'll tell you. Use the most common proxifier. Proxifier inside the virtual machine or outside, for example, is pretty good software, although it is not without its certain disadvantages. But when using this software inside the virtual machine, you will have the ability to spoof the TCP/IP fingerprint and thus the systems will not be able to identify you. But I make a correction, the point is that TCP spoofing is TCP spoofing, and in general TCP/IP fingerprinting is used in a very limited number of anti-fraud systems. Therefore, this functionality is not suitable for everyone, at least for the moment, since at the moment only the threat metric system uses TCP/IP fingerprint detection. It is recommended to use this no against it. In fact, that's all for now. The system is completely ready to work, and if you and I press the start button, we will start automatically installing and configuring our operating system. The system will be ready to work in a few minutes, so you just need to wait. It all depends on the speed of your hard drive. For some, it will take as little as 2 minutes, for users it may take as little as 5 minutes. You don't need to do anything, everything is fully automatic, just press start and start working in a few minutes. Well, we will now move on to the installation of the system and consider its important point. So, the installation of the operating system has begun. It will go in automatic mode. But for now I would like to acquaint you with a few more interesting points. First, in some cases, your ISP may not allow you to connect to the Keygen.sh license server. Sometimes it happens. What to do in this case? In this case, on the Proxy tab, you can install any proxy, for example, the same proxy purchased on the Detect Expert website, only in SOCKS 5 format. You can install it here. And after that, all your connections, I mean connections to the licensing system, will be through this proxy. In this way, you can avoid being banned by the provider. Convenient and simple. Let's move on. There is an important point related to the system of additional options. In the MISC tab, we see the first block foreign protocols. An old option, I don't recommend using it at the moment. However, what does this option do? This option prevents the entire anti-detect system from using all protocols except TCP. This option creates firewall rules on your host system. Not on the guest side, but on the host side. It was used before, at the moment you can use it, you cannot, as it will be convenient for you. There is a unique feature called Unique VM Processes for Proxifier. What should I do with this feature? When you activate this feature, each virtual machine that will be started will start with a separate executable name. That is, for example, our machine is called test VM. This means that you can use Proxifier on the host system to find the test VM.exe process or simply write a rule for this process, and you will always have your virtual machine start and activate the proxy from the Proxifier. This is quite convenient in terms of the fact that, as we have already introduced you to the TCP fingerprint spoofing system, if you set up a network bridge connection in your virtual machines and run a Proxifier on the host machine, where you will have your own proxy profile for each virtual machine, this is convenient. However, do not forget that activating this option can sometimes cause a problem on the part of the UAC, Universal Access Control, User Access Control System. I apologize. So what you need to do will be you will just need to run the anti-detect not on behalf of the user, but run it on behalf of the administrator, and then enabling and disabling this option will be available for you. Well, now we are finishing the installation of our operating system. It took about 2 minutes and now its direct configuration will begin, as well as while the installation is still in progress. I would also like to talk about the extension pack. What's it? Now, if we go to the Extensions tab, we have the extension pack, and we have it. We have an old entry. Here we will delete it, we don't need it. Yes, the VM is active, so you can't remove the extension pack right now. I'll tell you the gist. Extension Pack is an expansion package from Oracle. It can be downloaded from the official VirtualBox website, or ordered a custom one through the Detect Expert website. This extension pack allows, firstly, to encrypt the operating system, and secondly, it allows you to use camera forwarding on your laptop. In other words, if you have a built-in camera on your laptop, you can use it to work in a virtual machine. In our reality, this is an absolutely useless function, because if you need a webcam in a virtual machine, you just take a USB camera and add a USB camera here in the virtual machine settings. After that, the USB camera will be automatically dropped into your virtual machine. In the same way, if you need any other USB device, use the appropriate tab here, or in the virtual machine itself. On the Devices tab here, there is a USB tab, so select the devices you need. If you want to share files from a virtual machine with a host virtual machine, you need to create a shared folder. Accordingly, click on the plus sign you specify the folder we want and tick 2 boxes. Auto mount and make permanent. After that, the folder of your host machine will be available in the guest machine and you will then be able to transfer large files. For small information, for textual information, there is an automatic clipboard. It's bidirectional, meaning you can both copy text from the VM and into the VM. It doesn't work for files, it only works for text. Drag and drop mode is disabled by default. This mode works with minor problems, but not through the fault of Vector T13 technologies, but, let's say, this is a flaw of Oracle itself. In other words, you can turn it on, and it may work for you, it may not. This is due to fundamental errors in the source code of the company, in the source code of the VirtualBox product, and in our case, it does not make much sense to devote a large amount of resources to solving and rewriting several thousand lines, since there is a shared folder mode that will work much more reliably. In fact, working with anti-detect is quite simple at the moment. Everything is installed automatically. In the AntiDetect AI version, it is possible to write a script and the system will perform the actions for you to register accounts, for example, and so on. But our guide is written for the AntiDetect 4 system and everything works fully automatically. From the moment of creation, from the moment of pressing the new button to the moment of receiving a working machine, it can take about 5 to 7 minutes. That is, it depends on the speed of your hard drive. On the current one, I don't use the fastest hard drive, or rather the hard drive is the fastest, but the current motherboard does not allow it to use its maximum potential. On the current configuration, I have about 3,500 megabytes of read and 3,000 writes, which is half of the real figures. At the moment, Samsung 990 Pro drives reach 7,500 megabytes of reading and 6,500 megabytes of writing. As a result, the system will be doubled in speed and you will receive a fully configured system in less than 3 minutes. Well, our operating system is almost ready. Personality is being created. And now the AntiDetect system will start additional configuration, installation of drivers and additional software inside our virtual machine. And also, if you want to build multiple machines at the same time, you can create multiple platforms. And if your PC's resources allow, you can run an automatic installation of an unlimited number of virtual machines. So, we can see now that the screen resolution has been set to the lowest available one, which is 1366 by 768. On my own behalf, I would like to say that I recommend setting the screen extension as much as possible. That is, we now see pop-up notifications about what functionality is being used. In order to make it easier to see in the video, I will now increase the size to 1920, maybe even more. Yes, this screen resolution will be better for us. So we can see, fake WebRTC has been installed. Now a VPN connection is being established. There is a VPN connection established and our additional functionality will now be, that is, installing the Chrome browser, opening ports. Oh, by the way, there's another pretty important point. When you install the Chrome browser, the profile is also randomized in the Chrome browser. In other words, when we install the Chrome browser, we have a default defined ID that is used in the xClient data parameter. To improve stability, when installing a Chrome browser, the default xClient data is automatically reset to a new one. This is equivalent to actually creating a new profile in the Google Chrome browser. While we are installing our browser, we will now check the geolocation module in the Edge browser. As a reminder, as I said earlier, the geolocation module in the Edge browser is active by default. And first of all, let's check where we are with the Maps app in addition to the browser. Let me remind you that I am now in Amsterdam. Let's see where the system defines us. Sometimes it takes time for maps to load. And sometimes it doesn't work at all. Still, some Microsoft products can't improve. Okay, let's leave it for now. Let the maps load. Now let's ask Google where we are. We don't have a very fast internet connection right now, probably due to the installation of Chrome. And no, everything is fine. The maps are loaded and accordingly they show exactly the place that I chose when creating our virtual machine. We see Brooklyn, New York. That is, the geolocation module is active here by default. And let's ask Google just where I will go to the maps. Chromium is still being installed. Chrome is still being downloaded. And so we have now been determined that we are in New York, but our exact location is still unknown. For this we need to click the appropriate button from the Google Maps functionality. Here's this geolocation button. The browser asks if we allow access to the location, and accordingly get the same location. This functionality is very important for many systems, in particular, the most popular system for which it is the Neteller system, and GeoComply, of course. In the Edge browser, everything is okay. We can also go to the BrowserLeaks web resource. So now we will wait for us. Let's better wait until we have completely finished installing the Chrome browser. Since the system has not yet finished the configuration algorithm, I mean the anti-detect system. The Chrome browser has just been shipped as the default browser. We made one small mistake, but don't pay attention to it, it's not very important to us. Fake WebGL mode wasn't enabled for the Edge browser because it installed this idiotic browser bar. So, open Google Chrome. The system is 100% ready to work. Let's check out the functionality in the same way. IP address. We see everything is okay. Windows fingerprint. WebRTC IP address matches our IP address. DNS Mobile United States, New York. Everything is okay. On the WebGL tab, we see our video card that has been exposed. That is, everything works as it should. But if we now go to Google Maps, let's check the geolocation module and click geolocation and allow hello. See what happens Google Maps even when you click on the location permission. It doesn't show our location specifically where we are. It only shows an approximate area of how to cure it. Go to the Chrome Flex tab, and here we need to find WinRT geolocation implementation and set this checkbox to enabled. After that, reload our Chrome and check how our geolocation module works now. Press the location button and we are exactly at the point that we set. So if you need a more accurate geolocation, you know how to set it. At this point, the system is completely ready to go and fully corresponds to a real computer that you would go and buy now in a store in Brooklyn. According to your data, there is a full IP match. According to geolocation, there is a full match. Also, just in case, I recommend, let's take the Twilio test. The Twilio test allows us to verify that our network services are working adequately, i.e. I mean TCP and UDP protocols. The first UDP connection was successful, the TCP connection was successful, and TLS was successful. And now we will be asked for the only test that we will not pass, which is the camera test. Why? Because at the moment there is no camera in the virtual machine. As far as I remember, we have a virtual microphone, and we can look at it. Yes, we have a virtual microphone and it is active. As we can see, we have different audio devices here. Well, we have a default camera. There is no virtual camera in this case, so there is no point in adding it. In principle, we can end our testing here. Everything works, everything is okay. That is, we are now 100% in line with the real user, so you can get started. Thank you for your attention. You had a Vector T13 with you.